Hey guys, welcome to CA Dreams YouTube channel. So this is the lecture number 2 for your chapter number 4, and I have decided one new process for teaching you all, and that is for the audience of South India. I have also started giving explanations in English. Okay, so first I will explain in English and then I am going to explain in Hindi, or I may also do vice versa. Okay, so those who want to see my lectures in English, they can also see this, and those who want to understand in Hindi, they can also see this. And also, I started a essay series in which I thought that I should make you learn the essay names and essay numbers. So what you have to do is first learn all the essay numbers and essay names. Okay, and then what you have to do is that daily I will give you 4 essay numbers and you just have to write its names. Okay, but please try not to refer it from your books. Okay, so the essay numbers for today are essay 240, 265, 230 and 299. What you have to do is you just have to write the essay names in the comment box. Okay, in that way you will be able to remember the essay names and essay numbers. Okay, also if you know the names of only one essay or two essay, then also comment. The more you will write, the more you will be able to remember. Now coming back to the topic, components of risk of material misstatement. You all know that audit risk is made up of two elements. First was your risk of material misstatement, second was your detection risk. Now there are two components of risk of material misstatement. Risk of material misstatement comprises of inherent risk and control risk. Now you all know what is inherent risk. Inherent risk is the risk which is already inherited in the organization. That means before putting any control, it is already there in the organization, right? And control risk is the risk that fails to prevent, detect or correct the errors or misstatements, right? So that is your control risk. Now let's study a detailed version of this. So till here I guess both the categories of audience are satisfied, because the all which I told you till here was discussed in the lecture number 1. Now starting with the main part. So first I'll explain you in Hindi and then I will explain you in English. सो इसमें ये था कि जो इनहेरेंट रिस्क है वो कुछ एजर्शंस के लिए तो ज़्यादा हो सकती है एंड कुछ एजर्शंस के लिए कम हो सकती है. ये डिपेंड करेगा कई सारे फैक्टर्स पे. तो एक तो हो सकते हैं आपके एक्सटर्नल सर्कमस्टांसेस और एक हो सकते हैं फैक्टर्स जो हैं एंटिटी के अंदर. सो दैट मीन्स कि जैसे कॉम्प्लेक्स ट्रांजेक्शन है तो उसमें जो है वो ज़्यादा होगा, इनहेरेंट रिस्क के चांसेस वहाँ ज़्यादा होंगे. इसी तरह से कोई एक्सटर्नल इन्वायरमेंट है, सपोज़ जिस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का आप ऑडिट करने के लिए गए हैं वहाँ पर क्या है, वहाँ पर उस चीज़ का ज़्यादा स्टॉक है जो टेक्नोलॉजी डेवलपमेंट की वजह से चेंज हो गई है या फैशन में कुछ चेंज आ गया जिसकी वजह से जो स्टॉक कंपनी के पास में पड़ा हुआ था वो ऑब्सोलीट हो गया. तो इस वजह से कंपनी लॉस मेकिंग में हो जाएगी एंड ये कंपनी के लिए रिस्क वाली सिचुएशन आ जाएगी. ठीक है ना. फिर साथ ही में हमारी जो फैक्टर्स हैं एंटिटी में और उसके एनवायरनमेंट में, तो उसकी वजह से भी इनहेरेंट रिस्क के चांसेस ज़्यादा या कम हो सकते हैं. फिर ये बोल रहे हैं कि जब हम अपने फर्दर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स करते हैं, दैट मीन्स हम अपने टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोलिंग सब्सटेंसिव प्रोसीजर्स करते हैं, तो वो हम किसके बेसिस पे करते हैं, जो हमने रिस्क असेस किया होता है. तो मतलब इनहेरेंट रिस्क क्या था, जब तक हम लोगों ने कोई कंट्रोल नहीं लगाया था. तो अब अगर कंट्रोल लगा दिया है मैनेजमेंट ने, तो हम क्या करेंगे एज एन ऑडिटर, वी विल चेक कि जो टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल्स है क्या वो कंट्रोल्स एफिशिएंटली वर्क कर रहे हैं या नहीं. तो इसका सिंपल सा ये मतलब है कि जो इनहेरेंट रिस्क फैक्टर्स हैं ना, वो हेल्प करते हैं आपको आपके फर्दर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स को डिज़ाइन करने में. उसके बाद में कैटेगरी ऑफ ऑडिटर्स असेसमेंट, लोअर और हायर ईच कैटेगरी. इस पोर्शन में सिर्फ उन्होंने ये दे रखा है कि सपोज़ जो ऑडिटर है उसने इतना इनहेरेंट रिस्क असेस किया है. ठीक है. अब यहाँ तक उसने माना है कि यहाँ तक कि जो भी हमारे एजर्शंस होंगे ना, लाइक ट्रांजेक्शन्स, अकाउंट बैलेंसेस एंड डिस्क्लोजर्स, यहाँ तक उसने माना है कि लोअर अमाउंट ऑफ इनहेरेंट रिस्क होगा यहाँ पे. यहाँ से उसने माना है कि मॉडरेट होगा, यहाँ से उसने माना है हाई होगा. अब सपोज़ यहाँ परचेज़ है और यहाँ सेल है, इस तरह से यहाँ पे असेट्स, लायबिलिटी, ये सब उसने अपने एजर्शंस लिख लिए. अब हुआ क्या, यहाँ लोअर तो है बट ये जो परचेजेज़ है और ये जो सेल्स है, परचेजेज़ में सेल से भी ज़्यादा कम इनहेरेंट रिस्क है। तो उसका मतलब ये है कि अगर 2 असर्शंस हैं तो एक में ज़्यादा इनहेरेंट रिस्क हो सकता है और एक में कम इनहेरेंट रिस्क हो सकता है। हालांकि हमने दोनों को लोअर की कैटेगरी में रखा है, उसके बाद में भी एक में ज़्यादा रिस्क हो सकता है और एक में कम हो सकता है। उसी के बेसिस पे फिर हम क्या डिसाइड करेंगे अपना फर्दर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर कि किस पे हमें ज़्यादा चेकिंग करनी है और किस पे हमें कम चेकिंग करनी है। जहाँ ज़्यादा रिस्क होगा वहाँ हम ज़्यादा चेकिंग करेंगे, जहाँ कम रिस्क होगा वहाँ हम कम चेकिंग करेंगे, ठीक है ना। फिर इसके बाद में इट इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट टू कंसिडर द रीज़न फॉर ईच आइडेंटिफाइड रिस्क इवन इफ द रिस्क इज़ लोअर व्हेन ऑडिटर डिज़ाइन टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल्स एंड सब्सटेंसेस प्रोसीजर। तो बस ये यही बोल रहे हैं कि इट इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट कि हम कंसीडर दोनों रिस्क को करें, चाहे वो लोअर है चाहे वो हायर है, बट हमें उसका रीज़न ज़रूर कंसीडर करना है ऑफ ईच आइडेंटिफाइड इनहेरेंट रिस्क, एंड उसी के बेसिस पे हम अपना जो आगे का टेस्टिंग है, मतलब टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल, सब्सटेंसेस प्रोसीजर, ये सब हम डिज़ाइन करेंगे। नाउ कमिंग बैक टू इंग्लिश एक्सप्लेनेशन फॉर माई इंग्लिश ऑडियंस, see till last part we just have discussed what are inherent risk and what are control risk. Now in this portion they just have told that it is not compulsory that all the assertions have the same level of inherent risk. Some assertions may have higher amount of risk and some may have low amount of inherent risk. Now inherent risk it differs from assertion to assertion. Like some assertions may have higher amount of inherent risk and some may have lower amount of inherent risk. Now they have given an example that complex calculations, the transactions with complex calculations have high chances of inherent risk, so they have high amount of inherent risk. Okay, now also inherent risk is influenced by various factors. So first is the factors in the entity and its environment, so they may also give rise to inherent risk. Secondly, they have told you that external circumstances giving rise to business risk may also influence the inherent risk. So that means if there is any change in fashion, change in technology, so the existing stock might get obsolete. So in that way the inherent risk with the assertion of inventory, right, your assets, it is higher than other assertions. So they are just saying that there are various assertions, like assertions are broadly classified into 3 categories: your account balances, transactions and disclosures. So some assertions may have higher amount of risk and some may have lower amount of inherent risk. Okay, now in the next para they have told you that on the basis of the inherent risk we design test of controls and substantive procedures. Now you all know that what is the first step. First step is your risk assessment procedure and second step is your further audit procedure, right? So on the basis of the risk you have assessed, you will design the test of controls and substantive procedures. So it will be totally based on inherent risk factors. Then they have told you that suppose the auditor has considered a level of inherent risk. So this is the level of inherent risk. Until here the auditor has considered that there is a lower level of inherent risk, and from here they have considered that it is higher, and in the middle it is moderate. Okay, now he has classified 4 assertions, that means purchase, then sales, then asset, then liability. Okay, now they are saying that purchase has a lower level of inherent risk than the sales. So they are just saying that some assertions, although both assertions are in the lower category, but purchase has lower level of inherent risk than the sales. So that is why on the basis of this meter the auditor will design his test of controls, that to which assertions he needs to design more complex audit procedures, and for which assertion he needs to just check it roughly, or he does not need to check in detail. So that means if purchases has lower level of inherent risk and sales has a higher level of inherent risk, or the liabilities have the higher level of inherent risk, then he will design his further audit procedures accordingly with the level of your inherent risk. Okay, I hope I am clear, and if I am not, then please let me know through the comment section. Now moving on to the next topic, and the example they have given: a lack of sufficient working capital to continue operations, or a declining industry categorized by a large number of business failure. So this is your inherent risk. Okay, I guess you are clear with this example, and let me explain you. Okay, a lack of sufficient working capital to continue operations, or the declining industry categorized by a large number of business failure. Now there is a lack of sufficient working capital. They don't have sufficient working capital to continue operations. So this is an inherent risk as the business may fail. So there is no control put by the industry yet, but due to the circumstances of the industry, that was this point, factors in the entity and its environment, the organization has an inherent risk, and there are high chances that the organization may fail to survive in the going concern. Now moving on to the control risk. Now we have assessed the inherent risk. Now what we are going to do, we are going to move to the next step, that is the entity has put controls. Okay, it has put internal controls and various controls to minimize the audit risk, but still there might be some misstatement which are not be able to prevent it, detected or corrected. So that amount of risk is known as your control risk. So control risk is a function of the effectiveness of the design, implementation and maintenance of internal control by management. However, internal control can only reduce but not eliminate risk of material misstatement in the financial statements. This is because of inherent limitations of internal control. Now entity has put its internal control in the organization. Okay, so if you want to assess the control risk, so what you will do, you will check the effectiveness of the design, the implementation, that how the controls are being implemented in the organization, and how the management has maintained its internal control. So on the basis of that, you will check that whether these controls would be effective to minimize the risk, or the controls are ineffective to minimize the risk. They are also saying that the internal controls can only reduce but cannot eliminate the risk, because in chapter number 1 we have studied that there are some inherent limitations of internal control that cannot eliminate the audit risk. That means that cannot turn the audit risk to zero. So that is why the control risk can just reduce but cannot eliminate audit risk. So example is given: the possibility of human errors or mistakes, or of controls being circumvented by collusion. So there is a possibility that there might be some human errors which may lead to misstatement. Also, if there is a collusion among the collusion among the outsiders. Okay, that means they have a collusion, and the management is itself committed into fraud. So in that way the controls will get failed, and the report which will be given on that basis will be wrong itself. So that is why the audit risk cannot be eliminated, it just can be reduced. Accordingly, some control risk will always exist. They are just saying that some level of control risk will always exist, but still the auditor should try his best to reduce the control risk to the maximum. So the S's provide the conditions under which the auditor is required to test the operating effectiveness of control in determining the nature, timing, extent of substantive procedures to be performed. Now control risk is also a part of your risk assessment procedure. So that is why there are various conditions on basis of which the auditor will design his nature, timing, extent of further audit procedure or your substantive procedures. So in test of controls you will determine the control risk, right? And then what you will do, you will design the substantive procedures. Now before discussing the next point, let me explain you the whole point in Hindi again. तो कंट्रोल रिस्क क्या होते हैं? कंट्रोल रिस्क वो रिस्क होता है जो कि कंट्रोल्स जो हैं वो फेल हो गए हैं रिस्क को प्रिवेंट, डिटेक्ट या करेक्ट करने के लिए, ठीक है ना? तो कंट्रोल रिस्क वो फंक्शन है, मतलब ऑडिटर जब रिस्क असेसमेंट प्रोसीजर में कंट्रोल रिस्क चेक करे होगा तो वो क्या करेगा, वो ये चेक करेगा कि क्या डिज़ाइन है, क्या इफेक्टिवनेस है, ठीक है, क्या इफेक्टिवनेस है कंट्रोल्स की, किस टाइप से उन्होंने इम्प्लीमेंट किया है, एंड कैसे उन्होंने इंटरनल कंट्रोल मैनेज किए हैं. बट बिकॉज इन हमारी जो SC200 में भी हमारा डिस्कस हुआ था दैट देयर आर इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस टू इंटरनल कंट्रोल, ठीक है ना? तो इनहेरेंट लिमिटेशंस की वजह से जो हमारा ऑडिट रिस्क है दैट कैन नॉट बी रिड्यूस टू ज़ीरो, इट जस्ट कैन बी रिड्यूस, इट कैन नॉट बी एलिमिनेटेड. मतलब ऑडिट रिस्क हमारा ज़ीरो नहीं हो सकता, वो सिर्फ और सिर्फ रिड्यूस हो सकता है, ठीक है ना। तो एग्जाम्पल उन्होंने दिया, पॉसिबिलिटी है ह्यूमन एरर हो जाए या कोई मिस्टेक हो जाए या फिर मैनेजमेंट खुद ही फ्रॉड में इन्वॉल्व हो जाए। तो इस वजह से क्या है, हम जो है कुछ ना कुछ कंट्रोल रिस्क तो तब भी रहेगा, बट हम क्योंकि ऑडिटर हैं तो हम लोगों को ट्राई करना चाहिए कि हम काफ़ी हद तक जो रिस्क है उसको रिड्यूस कर पाएँ। फिर ऐसे कुछ ऐसी कंडीशन बताते हैं जिसके बेसिस पे ऑडिटर को अपना जो कंट्रोल्स की इफेक्टिवनेस है उसको चेक करना है, एंड उसी के बेसिस पे वो क्या डिज़ाइन करेगा, अपना सब्सटेंसिव प्रोसीजर। ठीक है ना। Okay, now starting with this, auditor assesses control risk as rely or not rely on control. Now, while testing of controls, the auditor needs to decide that whether he should rely on the controls put by the management or not. So, when making control risk assessment, the auditor should consider the following conditions. The control environment influence over internal control. A control environment that supports the prevention and detection or correction of material misstatements allow greater confidence in the reliability of internal control and audit evidence generated within the entity. However, it does not guarantee the effectiveness of specific controls. We therefore test the operating effectiveness of controls over significant classes of transactions when we plan to take a control reliance strategy. Conversely, the control environment may undermine the effectiveness of specific controls and is a key factor in our control risk assessment. So that means the control environment influence over internal control. Uh, the the environment which you have for your controls will obviously influence the effectiveness of your internal controls, right? So a control environment that supports the prevention, detection and correction. That means by putting those controls, the management is able to prevent, detect and correct the material misstatement. So if you are finding that the material misstatement must be prevented, detected and corrected, then you can have a greater confidence on the reliability of internal control and audit evidence generated within the entity. But it does not guarantee. That means because there are obviously inherent limitations, that is why you cannot guarantee the effectiveness of specific controls also. We means we as an auditor should check the significant class of transaction. That means what you have to do is you just have to check the significant classes of transactions, the transactions which you are finding very of utmost importance, of very much significance. What you will do, you will check that whether those transactions have a high reliability of internal control or not. And if you are finding that they are highly reliable, that means according to you the misstatements are prevented, detected and corrected. So what you will do, you will place a reliance on the internal control when we plan to take a controls reliance strategy. Conversely, the control environment may undermine the effectiveness of specific controls and is a key factor in our control risk assessment. So they are just saying that control environment plays a very much importance in your internal control. That means if you are finding that control environment is strict, then you may place reliance on the internal controls. But if you are finding that it is not proper, then you cannot rely on the internal controls. So it undermines the effectiveness of a specific controls and is a key factor for your control risk assessment. Okay, now let me explain this in Hindi. इसमें इन्होंने सिर्फ यही बताया है कि जो कंट्रोल इन्वायरमेंट है ना, वो हमारे इंटरनल कंट्रोल को बहुत ज़्यादा इन्फ्लुएंस करते हैं। तो कंट्रोल एनवायरनमेंट क्या है कि मैनेजमेंट कितना स्ट्रिक्ट है अपने कंट्रोल्स को लेके, एंड जो कंपनी के लोग हैं वो उसको कैसे फॉलो कर रहे हैं। तो अगर जो आपका कंट्रोल एनवायरनमेंट है, आपको ऐसा लगता है अपनी प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट में कि जो कंट्रोल एनवायरनमेंट यहाँ है उसकी वजह से जो भी यहाँ पे मिस स्टेटमेंट है वो प्रिवेंट, डिटेक्ट और करेक्ट हो गई होंगी, तो उससे आप क्या कर सकते हो, आप ग्रेटर रिलायबिलिटी उस पर प्लेस कर सकते हो। लेकिन इसमें आप कुछ गारंटी तो है नहीं। हाँ, बट अगर आपको लग रहा है कि स्पेसिफिक क्लासेस ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शन्स में जो मिस स्टेटमेंट है वो प्रिवेंट, डिटेक्ट और करेक्ट हो गई, तो आप क्या करोगे, उस पर रिलायंस प्लेस आप कर सकते हो। फिर आप इसमें इन्होंने बस ये बोला है कि कंट्रोल एनवायरनमेंट जो है उसके बेसिस पे ही इफेक्टिवनेस जो है कंट्रोल्स की वो डिटरमाइन होती है। तो अगर आपको इतना सा भी डाउट हो रहा है कंट्रोल एनवायरनमेंट में, देन यू शुड नॉट प्लेस रिलायंस ऑन इंटरनल कंट्रोल। ओके, moving on to the second topic, evaluations of the related IT process that support application and IT dependent manual controls. So that means evaluations of the related IT processes. IT processes means the processes which are used because automated environment is there in the organization. So you just have to evaluate the IT processes that support application and IT dependent manual controls. So you just have to check that. And if you are finding that there is no such mistake in that, then you must rely on it. I guess this is self understood, and I should not explain this point again in Hindi. If again if you are not able to understand it, then you can comment down. Our testing approach over SCOTs, that means your significant classes of transactions and disclosure processes. So what is your testing approach? They told you na that you can check the effectiveness over significant classes of transactions. So they are saying what should be your approach and disclosure processes, that is control reliance or substantive only strategy. So that means you should check that whether there is only controls in it or there is a proper disclosure. If there is a proper disclosure about the significant classes of transactions, then you can place a higher level of reliance, but if it is not, then you cannot. This I should explain in हिंदी as well. इसमें बस ये लोग ये बोल रहे हैं कि आपकी जो टेस्टिंग अप्रोचेस हैं और जो डिस्क्लोजर प्रोसेसेस हैं वो बहुत ज़्यादा इम्पैक्ट डालता है जब आप सिग्निफिकेंट क्लासेस ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शन्स को टेस्ट करते हो. तो मतलब ये कि आप उस पर कब उसके कंट्रोल्स पे कब आप रिलायंस प्लेस कर पाओगे, अगर वहाँ पे प्रॉपर डिस्क्लोजर प्रोसेसेस भी फॉलो हुए हैं. तभी तो आप, अगर क्योंकि डिस्क्लोजर होगा तो आपको एविडेंस मिलेगा एंड तभी तो आप ज़्यादा रिलायंस प्लेस कर पाओगे. तो उन्होंने यही बोला है. फिर उसके बाद में एक्सपेक्टेशन ऑफ द ऑपरेटिंग इफेक्टिवनेस ऑफ कंट्रोल्स बेस्ड ऑन अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द एंटिटीज प्रोसेस. So that means the expectation on the operating effectiveness of the controls, that is based on understanding of the entities process. That means you as an auditor understood that what is the procedure followed by the entity, and then you will decide that whether you should rely on the controls placed by them or not. Like for example, if you find that the organization is well disciplined, then you can just guess that if they are doing all the work in a very disciplined manner, that means they must have followed the controls efficiently. So this is all given in this. Okay, and if there is a minimal doubt also, then you should not place reliance on the internal control. Example they have given: identify a control that a shipping report is prepared only for goods that have shipped. To determine that only sales that have occurred are recorded, identify a further control that sales cannot be recorded unless a shipping report is produced. In this example, several controls operate collectively in order to address the occurrence assertion for sales. In another example, a regular reconciliation of quantities shipped to quantities billed is a specific control that may be effective enough by itself to address the WCV, what could go wrong regarding the completeness assertion in a sale process. So they are just these are the just examples for reliance on internal control. So they are just saying a regular reconciliation of quantities shipped to quantities billed is a specific control. What you are doing is you are just reconciling the quantities shipped and quantities billed, and if you are finding that there is a mismatch between the two, then you must find the reasons that what could go wrong. So this is all given, and this is regarding the completeness assertion. So in this way the auditor checks that whether he should rely or not. Now if they are not matching, ठीक है, अगर ये दोनों मैच नहीं कर रहे हैं तो इसका मतलब क्या है, that there is something going wrong, right? So that is why you will not place reliance on the internal control. So in this way the auditor decides that whether he should place control on the internal control or not. Now comes the next point: control risk assessment when controls deficiencies are identified. Now what did you do? You as an auditor, you tested the controls and you found that there are deficiencies in the control placed by the entity. So when auditor identifies deficiencies and reports on internal controls, he determines the significant financial statement assertions that are affected by the ineffective controls in order to evaluate the effect of control risk assessment and strategy for the audit of financial statements. So that means the auditor found that the controls are not working properly. Now what you will do as an auditor, you will see that ineffective control, what is the impact on the several transactions. Okay, so you will evaluate the effect of those ineffective controls over the entity. So when control deficiencies are identified, an auditor identifies and tests more than one control for each relevant assertion. He evaluates control risk considering all of the controls he has tested. Now, if auditor determines that they support or rely on controls risk assessment, or if compensating controls are identified, tested, and evaluated to be effective, he may conclude that the rely on controls is still appropriate. Otherwise, we change our control risk assessment to not rely on internal controls. Now till here they are saying when controls deficiencies are identified. That means you have identified that there might be some deficiencies in the control. So what you will do? You will do one more test. And if that test also you find some misstatement. Okay. Then what you will do? You will decide not to rely. And if you find that the other he does a multiple he gives more than one control test for more than one control on each assertion, and if the auditor determines that the support on rely on controls risk assessment, or if compensating errors are identified, tested, and evaluated to be effective, that means he has done more than one test of the control. See, let me explain you this again. First, he found that there might be deficiencies in the control. Okay, there were some deficiencies in the controls. He found that. Now what he will do? He will do another test. Now in that test, if he found that there are no such misstatements and the controls on other assertions is well, then what he will do? He can rely on in controls. But if he found that there is some misstatement in those assertions also, or if he is doubting on that controls that there might be some deficiencies in those the controls of those assertions also, then he will not rely. Okay, now let me explain you in Hindi. इसमें इन्होंने बस ये बोला है कि जो ऑडिटर है ना, वो अगर डेफिशिएंसीज उसको लग रही हैं तो वो क्या करेगा? वो इवेल्युएट करेगा। अगर उसको मतलब कंट्रोल्स में डेफिशिएंसीज लग रही हैं तो वो क्या करेगा? वो एन ऑडिटर आइडेंटिफाइज एंड टेस्ट मोर देन वन कंट्रोल फॉर ईच असर्शन। तो वो एक असर्शन पे अगर उसको एक टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल से उसको डेफिशिएंसी मिली है तो वो एक और टेस्ट करेगा। ठीक है, तो he evaluates control risk considering all the controls he has tested. Now, if the auditor determines that they support or rely on control risk assessment, or if compensating errors are identified, tested, and evaluated to be effective, he may conclude that the rely on controls is still appropriate. तो मतलब ये कि अगर उसने जैसे एक assertion पे एक टेस्ट किया, उसमें उसको इनफेक्टिव लग रहा है, वो डेफिशिएंसी लग रही है, उसने दूसरा टेस्ट किया, उसमें उसको इफेक्टिव लग रहा है, तो वो क्या कर सकता है? कंट्रोल पे रिलायंस प्लेस कर सकता है, उस पर विश्वास कर सकता है। बट अगर उसको लग रहा है कि उसमें भी कुछ गलती है, ठीक है, कंपनसेटिंग एरर्स वगैरह उसमें भी आइडेंटिफाई नहीं हो सकते हैं, तो उसमें वो जो रिलायंस है वो प्लेस नहीं करेगा। So when a deficiency relates to an ineffective control, that is the only control identified for an assertion, he revised risk assessment to not rely on controls for associated assertions, as no other controls have been identified that mitigate the risk related to the assertion. So when a deficiency relates to an ineffective control, that is the only control identified for the assertion. So if he is finding deficiency in the controls, okay, or if it is finding that the controls are ineffective, what he will do? He will not rely on controls. So they are just saying that, and if he will not rely on controls, he will find that what can go wrong out of several what can go wrongs. He can rely on controls but performs additional substantive procedures to adequately address the risk related to the deficiency. Now, as an auditor, it is his major duty to give an appropriate opinion, right? So if he is thinking to rely on controls, what he will do? He will perform some additional procedures so that he can place a proper reliance, or he can properly decide that whether he should put reliance on the controls or not. Let me explain you this whole thing in English again. See, this is very simple, don't get confused. It is just given that the auditor will either rely or he will not rely. If he is finding that there are some deficiencies in the control, he will go with one more test. If he is finding that in the other test of that assertion there are no such deficiencies, then what he can do? He can place reliance. And if it is not satisfied, then he will not place reliance. Also, if again there is a doubt then what he can do? He can do some additional substantive procedures and can go to a final decision whether to place reliance or not. So all this is given in that. It is pretty much simple but it is a little bit complicated. मैं इसको हिंदी में बता देती हूँ. सिंपल इसमें इन्होंने यही दे रखा है कि या तो वो रिलायंस प्लेस करेगा या नहीं करेगा. रिलायंस अगर उसको प्लेस करना है तो उसको 2 टेस्ट करने पड़ेंगे. सपोज उसको डेफिशिएंसी मिली, ठीक है, अब वो दूसरा टेस्ट करेगा, उसमें उसको कोई डेफिशिएंसी नहीं मिली, तो वो क्या कह सकता है कि मैं चलो रिलायंस कर लेता हूँ, लेकिन वो क्या करेगा, सब्सटेंसिव प्रोसीजर, एडिशनल प्रोसीजर्स करेगा, जिसके बेसिस पे वो मल्टीपल ऐसे टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल्स करेगा, जिसके बेसिस पे अगर उसको सेटिस्फैक्ट्री रिजल्ट मिलता है तो वो रिलायंस प्लेस करेगा, एंड अगर उसको नहीं मिलता ऐसा कुछ तो वो रिलायंस प्लेस नहीं करेगा. तो बस इन्होंने यही ले रखा है कि मतलब हम या तो ये फाइंड करेंगे कि व्हाट कैन गो रॉन्ग, उसको फाइंड करने के बाद में भी अगर हमें नहीं पता लग पा रहा है तो हम क्या करेंगे, रिलायंस ही प्लेस नहीं करेंगे. और अगर हमने पता लगा लिया व्हाट कैन गो रॉन्ग, देन ही कैन परफॉर्म एडिशनल substantive procedures. Okay, it is a little bit complicated but इसका जो total meaning है वो यही है. Combined assessment of the risk of material misstatement. The assays do not ordinarily refer to inherent risk and control risk separately, but rather to a combination of risk of material misstatement. You all know that ROMAM, that is a risk of material misstatement, equals to IR plus CR, right? So, however, the auditor may make separate or combined assessment of inherent risk. So they are saying that it is not separately identified, but it is a combo of both of these. But the auditor may make separate assessments of, that means he can separately assess the inherent risk and can separately assess the control risk depending on preferred audit techniques or methodologies he is using. So I guess this was pretty much clear to all of you. Then they are saying the assessment of risk of material misstatement may be expressed in quantitative terms such as in percentages or in non-quantitative terms. In case the need for the auditor to make appropriate risk assessment is more important than the different approaches by which they may be made, it can be concluded from the above that risk of material misstatement equal IR and CR. Now audit risk equals IR into CR into detection risk. So they are just saying this, and what did they say here? The assessment of risk of material misstatement may be expressed in quantitative term also and non-quantitative term also. That means the auditor can write that he is placing this much of a risk of material misstatement. That means this percentage of risk of material misstatement he has assessed. So it is just given that it can be expressed in both quantitative terms and non-quantitative terms, that means higher or lower. In any case the need of the auditor to make appropriate risk assessment is more important than different approaches. That means the main thing that you want is the risk assessment to be assessed. So SA 315 establishes requirements and provides guidance on identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. So how will you identify and assess the risk of material misstatement is given in your SA 315. What is the name of this essay? Identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. So if you want to know the detailed procedure that how do we do this, you can go and read out this essay. And you must prepare this essay because it is very, very important. Okay, in that essay you will find the whole process of performing the risk assessment procedures. Okay, now coming on to the next category, that is your detection risk, and this is going to be the last topic for this video as already 32 minutes video has been made. Okay, what was detection risk? The risk that the procedure performed by the auditor to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level will not detect a misstatement that exists and that could be material either individually or when aggregated with the other misstatement. So audit risk equals risk of material misstatement plus detection risk. Now detection risk means we are detecting that whether the misstatement that exists That means you are trying to detect the material misstatement that exists in the organization. So there might be some misstatements that are left to be detected. So the relevance of that misstatements may be higher, and that relevance will become the detection risk. So the risk that the procedures performed by the auditor, that means you as an auditor have performed various audit procedures to reduce audit risk to an acceptably low level, but there is a detection risk. That means there is a risk that will not uh, help you, that will not lead you to detect a misstatement that exists, and that could be material. That means there might be some material misstatement which are hidden by you, or which you left in your risk assessment part, okay, either individually or when aggregated with other misstatements. So that risk that the material misstatement are left to be detected, that risk is your detection risk. डिटेक्शन रिस्क क्या है? वो रिस्क कि कुछ मटेरियल मिस स्टेटमेंट ऑडिटर से डिटेक्ट होने को ही रहे, तो वो जो है वो मटेरियल मिस स्टेटमेंट भी हो सकते हैं, और उसकी वजह से आपका ओपिनियन गलत भी हो सकता है, तो वो रिस्क आपकी क्या है? डिटेक्शन रिस्क है. Now there is an illustration given to all the points and to whole of the portion IRCR, that means about the audit risk. So this you must read. Let me read it for you. XYZ is engaged in business and running several stores dealing in variety of items such as ready-made garments for all seasons, shoes, gift item, watches, etc. So there are security tags on each and every item. Moreover, inventory records are physically verified on monthly basis. So discuss the type of internal control and inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. So what might be the inherent risk here? The inherent risk might be that because items may be misapportioned by employees, therefore risk to the auditor is that inventory records would be inaccurate. So they are saying that several stores, there are security tags. Moreover, inventories are are physically verified on monthly basis. So inherent risk might be that the employees of the organization, they might have misappropriated the assets, okay. So this you might have learned in your chapter number 5 if you have done it, that the fraud involves misappropriation of assets, okay, and that misappropriation of assets may not be identified by the auditor. So this is an inherent risk, that because the store is dealing with so many items, shoes, gifts, watches, so there are high chances that the employees might have misapportioned the asset, misappropriated the assets, okay. So therefore risk to the auditor is that inventory records would be inaccurate. That means जो एम्प्लॉयज़ हैं उन्होंने अगर मिसअपोर्शन कर दिया होगा, कुछ चोरी वोरी कर ली होगी, तो उससे जो इन्वेंट्री रिकॉर्ड है वो इनएक्यूरेट है. सो द रिजल्ट्स विद द इन्वेंट्री रिकॉर्ड्स माइट नॉट बी दैट रिलायबल. सो दिस इज एन इनहेरेंट रिस्क. Then second they talk about control risk. So they are saying the security tags. So this is control placed by the management. Now as a test of control, as a part of test of control, you will check that whether this control is effective or not. So there is a security tag on each item displayed. Moreover, inventory records are physically verified on monthly basis. Despite various controls being implemented, still collusion among employees may be there, right? So here comes your inherent limitation on internal control, and risk to the auditor would again be that inventory records would be inaccurate. So again control risk will lead to that inventory records would be inaccurate because there might be collusion with the employees. वो लोग क्या कर सकते हैं? वो लोग जो सामान है उसको मिसअपोर्शन करके कहीं और शिफ्ट कर सकते हैं या सेल कर सकते हैं, तो उससे कंपनी का तो लॉस मेकिंग हो गया ना. सो दैट इज़ वाई इन्वेंट्री रिकॉर्ड्स इससे भी इनएक्यूरेट हो सकते हैं. एंड व्हाट इज़ द डिटेक्शन रिस्क हेयर? द ऑडिटर चेक्स द एफिशिएंसी एंड इफेक्टिवनेस ऑफ वेरियस कंट्रोल सिस्टम्स इन प्लेस. He would do that by making observation, inspection, inquiry. In addition to these, the auditor would also employ sampling techniques to check few transactions from beginning to end. So what is he doing? He is doing the audit procedure. However, despite all these procedures, the auditor may not detect the items which have been stolen or misapportioned. So this is what the misapportion they are talking here. And collusion means the collusion with the outsiders. So despite of this, if the employees are itself involved in the fraud, the auditor may fail to detect the misstatements, okay. So I guess you are clear with the audit risk portion, and from the next video we will continue with the portion number 2, the topic number 2. And my speed is a bit slow because I have to explain in both the languages, so it will be slow only, but I will try my best to complete this topic as soon as possible. Okay. And topic number 2 is not that lengthy. I will try to complete the whole topic in the next video itself. So ending this video here, and thank you so much for your support, and I hope these videos are helpful to you. Thank you.